Section 30 of the Endeavour Journal of Sir Joseph Banks. Journal from 25 August 1768 to 12 July 1771 by Joseph Banks. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Gail Timmerman Vaughan. Section 30. February 1770. 1770, February 1. Rained this morn very hard, as hard I think as it possibly could. Our poor little wild musicians were totally disturbed by it. In the even it came on to blow very hard, so much so that the ship drove, and for the first time in the voyage we had 3 anchors down. 1770, February 2. Still rainy, so little could be done today. Indeed, little remained to be done. 1770, February 3. Fine weather. The ship began to prepare for sailing, so the doctor and myself employed ourselves in getting together our lost specimens of seeds, shells, etc. I stayed at the watering place. He went with the captain to the further Ipa, who wanted to buy dry fish for sea stock, and did buy so much that at last the old men fairly told him that he must go away or he would leave them without provisions, which they enforced by some threats. Matters were, however, so well conducted that they parted peaceably. One of our gentlemen came home today, abusing the natives most heartily, whom he said he had found to be given to the detestable vice of sodomy. He said, had been with a family of Indians and paid a price for leave to make his addresses to any one young woman they should pitch upon him. One was chose as he thought, who willingly retired with him, but on examination proved to be a boy. That, on his returning and complaining of this, another was sent, who turned out to be a boy likewise. That on his second complaint he could get no redress, but was laughed at by the Indians. Far be it from me to attempt saying that vice is not practised here. This, however, I must say, that in my humble opinion, this story proves no more than that our gentleman was fairly tricked out of his cloth, which none of the young ladies chose to accept of on his terms, and the master of the family did not choose to part with. 1770, February 4. Prevented from sailing by our hay, which had been so thoroughly soaked by the late rains that it was too wet to put on board. Some conversation passed today concerning a report we had heard yesterday. 2 of our boats went out different ways, and returned at different times. The people of one said that they had met a double canoe, who told them that they had a few days ago lost a female child, who they suspected had been stolen and eaten by some of their neighbours. The other said that they had also met a double canoe, whose people told them that they had yesterday eat a child, some of whose bones they sold them. From hence many of our gentlemen were led to conclude that thefts of this kind are frequent among these Indians. This story, in my opinion, throws very little light upon the subject, as I am inclined to believe that our 2 boats, who went out at very different times in the morn, both in the same direction, one only farther than the other, saw one and the same canoe, and only differently interpreted the conversation of the people, as they know only a few words of the language, and eating people is now always the uppermost idea in their heads. This, however, I must say, that when such families have come off to the ship, even with an intention to fight with us, they have very often brought women and young children in arms, as if they were afraid to leave them behind. 1770, February 5. Ship employed in warping herself into a better berth for sailing. When after the anchor was carried out, a fortunate eddy wind blew her onto it. Our old man Topa'a was on board, of whom Tupaia asked many questions concerning the land, etc. His answers were nearly as follows: that the straits, which we had seen from the hills, were really a passage into the eastern sea; that the land to the south consisted of 2 islands, or several, which might be sailed round in 3 or 4 days in their canoes; that he knew of no other great land than that we had been upon, Aihia no Maui, of which Terra was the southern part; that he believed his ancestors were not born there, but came originally from Hawaii, the place from whence Tupaia and the islanders also derived their origin, which lay to the northward where there were many lands; that neither himself, his father, or his grandfather ever heard of ships as large as this being here before, but that they have a tradition of 2 large vessels, much larger than theirs, which some time or other came here, and were totally destroyed by the inhabitants, and all the people belonging to them killed. This Tupaia says is a very old tradition, much older than his great-grandfather, and relates to 2 large canoes, which came from Olimaroa, one of the islands he has mentioned to us. Whether he is right, or whether this is a tradition of Tasman's ships, whose size in comparison to their own they could not from relation conceive a sufficient idea of, and whom their warlike ancestors had told them they had destroyed, is difficult to say. Tupaia all along warned us not to believe too much anything these people told us, for he says they are given to lying. They told you that one of their people was killed by a musket and buried, which was absolutely false. Myself and the doctor went ashore today to wind up our bottoms, and fell in by accident with the most agreeable Indian family we have seen upon the coast. Indeed, the only one in which we have observed any order or subordination. It consisted of 17 people. The head of it was a pretty child of about 10 years old, who they told us was the owner of the land about where we wooded. The only instance of property we have met with among these people. He and his mother, who mourned for her husband tears of blood, according to their custom, sat upon mats. The rest sat round them. Houses they had none, nor did they attempt to make for themselves any shelter against the inclemencies of the weather, which I suppose they by custom very easily endure. Their whole behaviour was so affable, obliging, and unsuspicious, that I should certainly have accepted their invitation of staying the night with them, had not the ship been to sail in the morn. Most unlucky I shall always esteem it, that we did not sooner get acquainted with these people, from whom we might have learnt more in a day of their manners and dispositions, than from all that we have yet seen. 1770, February 6. Foul wind continued, but we contrived to turn out and get into the straits, which are to be called Cook's Straits. Here we were becalmed, and almost imperceptibly drawn by the tide near the land. The lead was dropped, and gave 70 fathom. Soon after saw an appearance like breakers, towards which we drove fast. It was now sunset, and night came on apace. The ship drove into this, which proved to be a strong tide, which set her directly upon a rock, to which she approached very near, when the anchor was dropped, which brought her up about a cable's length from it. Now we were sensible of the force of the tide, which roared like a mill-stream, and ran at 4 knots at least when it came in its strongest pushes, for it varied much. It ran in this manner till 12 o'clock, when, with the slack water, we got up the anchor with great difficulty, which lay in 70 fathom, and a light breeze from the northward cleared very soon from our dangers. 1770, February 7. Sensible again of the violence of the tides here, which passed us in great ripples, even in the middle of the straits, though they were judged to be 5 leagues over in the narrowest part. A large hill was seen, with much snow upon it on the southwest side. At noon we were almost abreast of it, and clear of the straits. It proved to be so far inland that we could hardly trace its outline, so probably it is very high indeed. The land between us and it was flat for a large extent, but seemed barren and swampy land. After this, barren and sandy, and rounded away fast to the southward. A small smoke upon it in the even was the only sign of inhabitants that we saw. 1770, February 8. As some of the officers declared last night that they thought it probable that the land we had been round might communicate by an isthmus, situate somewhere between where we are now and Cape Turnagain, though the whole distance is estimated at no more than 90 miles, the captain resolved to stand to the northward till he should see that cape, which was accordingly done in the morning, the wind being fair, though but a light breeze. As soon as we were in with the land, it appeared more fertile than any we had seen for some time, and the flats larger. But the weather was so hazy that we could not make use of our glasses. About this time 3 canoes put off from the shore, and followed us, and had patience to do so till 3 o'clock, when they overtook us, and immediately, with very little invitation, came on board. They appeared richer and more cleanly than any people we have seen since we were in the Bay of Islands, and their canoes were also ornamented in the same manner as those we had formerly seen on the north and this side of the island, but have not now seen since the river Thames, if even there. They were also more civil in their behaviour, and on having presents made them, immediately made presents to us in return, an instance we have not before met with in this island. All these things inclined me to believe that we were again come into the dominions of Tiratu, but on asking them they said no, he was not their king. 1770, February 9. Weather rather more clear than yesterday. On the land, white chalky cliffs appeared, such as we'd used to see. By 11 o'clock, Cape Turnagain was in sight, which convinced everybody that the land was really an island, on which we once more turned our heads to the southward. 1770, February 10. Stood along shore nearer the land than when we passed it before. It made in low hills, which seemed pretty well clothed with trees, but at the bottom of them was lowish land, making in tables, the tops of which were covered with white sand, that through the glass had much the appearance of ripe corn. Between these were a few valleys in which were wood, and in one of these we saw a few houses. In the evening the country rather mended upon us, I suppose, as many fires were seen, by which I suppose it to be better inhabited. 1770, February 11. Calm this morn. 2 canoes came off and sold us a few fish, and some of their fishing hooks, made upon a piece of wood, which I believe serves instead of bait, in towing, as the mother of pearl does on the islanders' towing hooks. Light breeze. The land did not look to so much advantage as when we passed it in our passage to the northward. 1770, February 12. This morn the seamen all imagined that we had passed the mouth of the straits, when to our surprise the great snowy hill which we had seen on the 7th appeared right ahead. At night, however, we were abreast of the straits, which, was it not for the hill, might be difficult to find in cloudy weather. 1770, February 13. Calm, which gave me an opportunity of going out in the boat and shooting some albatrosses. The air today was so hazy that we could scarce see the least traces of land, and yet the snow on the top of the mountain was very visible. 1770, February 14. Shooting again. Killed Nectris munda and Procellarius saltatrix. While I was out, 4 canoes came off from the shore, which I had not the least suspicion of, as we were farther from the shore than ever canoes had come before. Signals were made, but as the ship was right in the wake of the sun, none of them were seen by us till we saw the canoes themselves, when we immediately pulled for the ship, and got aboard, I believe without the Indians ever seeing us, so much was their attention taken up with looking at the ship. Indeed, if they had, no bad consequence could have ensued, as they were so timorous that they hardly dared venture within call of the ship. They stayed out but a while, and then went away, not time enough to get ashore before it was dark, for at sunset we saw them not more than halfway between us and the shore. I had 2 opportunities this even of seeing albatrosses raised from the water, which they did with great ease. Maybe when they are not able to do so, which I have seen, is when they are gorged with food. 1770, February 15. Calm again. At noon I went out and shot in less than an hour 6 albatrosses. Had the calm continued, I believe I might have shot 60, but a fair breeze of wind came, which made me not much regret the loss of the rest. 1770, February 16. Land this morn looked fertile enough. We had now entered upon a new island on which few signs of inhabitants were seen. A fire, however, made us certain that, howsoever thin they might be, it was not totally destitute of them. All day the weather was very clear. In the morn early, Mr. Gore imagined that he saw land to the southeastward. 1770, February 17. This morn we were close on board of the land, which made in ridges, not unlike the South Sea Islands between the tropics. The tops of these were bare, but in the valleys was plenty of wood. On the southeast part was an opening, which had all possible appearance of an excellent harbour. Near this, on the top of a hill, we saw 2 people setting. Mr. Gore, notwithstanding yesterday's run, was of opinion that what he saw yesterday morning might be land, so he declared on the quarter-deck, on which the captain, who resolved that nobody should say he had left land behind, unsought for, ordered the ship to be steered southeast. 1770, February 18. All yesterday, last night, and this morn, we stood for Mr. Gore's land, but not seeing any, and at noon, today, finding ourselves in latitude 45·17, everybody in the ship was convinced, except possibly Mr. Gore, that it was impossible to have on the 17th seen as far as where we were now, so we again stood to the westward. At night it was hazy, and a large shoal of bottle-nosed porpoises were about the ship, soon after which it began to flow brisk but fair. 1770, February 19. Last night, about 1, the officer of the watch came down to the captain with the disagreeable news of land right ahead and very near, which the wind, which blew strong, blew directly upon. We were soon, however, set at ease by the captain coming down and telling us that it was only a white cloud. In the morn it blew hard, and before noon, to our great surprise, land was indeed in sight, very high and far off. Many conjectures were made whether or not it was part of the land we had left, but that can only be determined by future observations. We had most of us put great confidence in the intelligence we had got of the Indians in the last anchoring place, notwithstanding Tupaya had even then warned us much not to depend upon the people, who, he said, he was sure were liars. We had been told, however, at different times by the inhabitants of both towns, that the straits really joined the two seas, and that the land to the southward might be sailed round in 3 or 4 days. The first we had found to be true, and from thence there appeared the highest probability that the other was so likewise, nor could we devise any reason the Indians could have in wishing to deceive us, especially as we had asked the question of 2 different societies who we had reason to think had not had any intercourse in the intermediate time, which had made us rather stretch the bounds of probability in allowing the practicability of a canoe sailing round the first part of the land we had seen in the given time. There was, however, between the farthest part of both the lands a space which we had not seen of more than 20 leagues in length. Supposing that to be a strait, the Indians certainly could not see over it, and the country they inhabited being very thinly peopled, they might at this time be ignorant that there was land beyond it. This much for conjectures. But be it remembered that they are merely such, and upon a subject that further observations will most probably clear up. Though we saw the land at noon, and at that time we had a fresh breeze of wind, yet it dropping nearly calm soon after, we were at night very distant from it. We had, however, soundings a great way off, and the land appeared very high, so that we once more cherished strong hopes that we had at last completed our wishes, and that this was absolutely a part of the southern continent, especially as we had seen a hint thrown out in some books that the Dutch, not contented with Tasman's discoveries, had afterwards sent other ships who took the land upon the same latitude as he made it in, and followed it to the southward as high as latitude 64 south. 1770 February 20. This morn we were close in with the land, which appeared flat, sandy, and very barren near the shore, but rising into high hills inland. We stood in pretty near to it, but saw no signs of inhabitants. Wind southerly, all day blowing fresh. 1770 February 21. Weather rather more moderate, but still foul, so that we again saw today the same part of the coast as yesterday. 1770 February 22. Still more moderate, but will not let us proceed at all to the southward. 1770 February 23. At noon calm today, which gives us hopes that we may have a fair wind. As we have now been 4 days upon nearly the same part of the coast, without seeing any signs of inhabitants, I think there is no doubt that this part, at least, is without inhabitants. 1770 February 24. Fresh breeze of wind and fair, so we went along shore briskly, but kept so far off from it that no observations could be made. We can only say that we did not see any fires. Other signs of people we could not have seen by reason of our distance, had they been ever so numerous or conspicuous. In the evening the land ahead inclined a good deal to the west. We were now on board of 2 parties, one who wished that the land in sight might, the other that it might not, be a continent. Myself have always been most firm for the former, though sorry I am to say that in the ship my party is so small that I firmly believe that there are no more heartily of it than myself and one poor midshipman. The rest begin to sigh for roast beef. 1770 February 25. Wind whiffling all round the compass. At night settled at southwest and blew hard. 1770 February 26. Still blew hard, in some squalls, very much so. Thermometer today at noon was 48, which pinched us a little. 1770 February 27. Weather a little more moderate, but no standing upon legs, without the assistance of hands as yet. Hope, however, that the heart of this long-winded gale is broke, according to the sea phrase. 1770 February 28. Weather a little more moderate, so that we got a little respite, and our different occupations went on as usual. Opened today a cask of cabbage put up by the receipt of this journal, which proved most excellently good, scarce at all worse for keeping in my opinion. End of section 30, February 1770.